silver is one of those key metals that's used in this whole new phenomenon that the human race is pushing. And this ball's not going backwards, it's going forward. So we're going to need more silver as we develop further, and it's just simply not around.
Hey friends, thank you so much for tuning in and welcome back. For those of you that follow the precious metals markets and want to know about the future of the US dollar and the economy, I've got no better guest for you in the world right now than Keith Neumeyer. He's the CEO of First Majestic Silver and the founder and chairman of First Mining Gold. He also is Kitco's Mining CEO of the Year. He just won that award. Welcome, Keith Neumeyer.
Well, thanks, Sean. It's been some time.
Yeah, it's been far too long, and I have so much to talk to you about, and I'm so glad that you've made the time to come back on. Hey, let me do a screen share here.
Okay.
Tell me if you can see this, Keith. There's the palladium price, $2,290. Take a look at the spread between the bid and the ask, a $150 per ounce spread between the bid and the ask. Now, I want to show you one other thing here, too. Take a look at this. This is the chart of Boeing Airlines. They can't make a plane that can fly, and yet the stock is at a 5-year high or very near a 5-year high. It just speaks to the nature of clown world in these clown markets because silver can't seem to catch a break. So I have an idea for you. Why don't you start stamping those beautiful silver bars with PD? And no, wait, that would be fraud. We can't sell the stuff as palladium. It's silver, but silver should be priced far higher than it is in clown world, but it's not.
Yeah, well, you couldn't tell the difference between a palladium bar and a silver bar, at least not as far as I can tell anyways. And I'd rather own silver anyways.
Yeah, and silver is darn near as functional. It's more functional. They use palladium in catalytic converters, and silver gets used in everything else. And yet we can't catch a bid because the COMEX, you know, I'm a broken record on this subject. You know that. So these are my words, not yours. But I'm sick and tired of this manipulated market where silver is punished. Those of us who invest in silver are punished, and everything else on earth is going through the roof. Just take a look at the Dow. Take a look at the Nasdaq. Take a look at Boeing. Everything's catching a bid, but not silver.
And these high-tech companies wouldn't exist without silver, which is makes it even more of a joke.
You're right. It's like getting splashed in the face. It's a bad joke.
We have these companies coming into our office and talking to us about supply agreements, and I always refuse to sign long-term supply agreements with the end user. I just don't think it's good business. They're obviously trying to lock up supply, which is what they should be doing, you know, because they're huge consumers. But they won't tell you what they actually need. You know, I've asked directly, you know, some of these high-tech manufacturers, you know, how many ounces of silver do you consume in a year? And God forbid they'll tell you, because they're so paranoid that the street is going to find out how tight the market is and how much they actually need of it. You know, all these hedge funds are going to start front running, you know, with Sony and Tesla and you know, you name it, Samsung and you know, Apple. All these monster consumers of metal will be front run by these hedge funds. So they're all scared to tell you how much metal they're using.
Well, isn't that interesting? And I think the reason the palladium price, there's a $150 per ounce spread between the bid and the ask is because the paper markets have fallen away. There is really no paper manipulation or paper market for palladium. So it's all physical. And I think I read a statistic. I don't know if it's at the LBMA or the COMEX, but I think they're down to like 25,000 ounces of physical in the palladium market. So it's truly insanity, and it tells us what should be happening if gold and silver were fairly traded the same way.
Yeah. Well, look, it's we're all in this business expecting that's ultimately going to happen, and you know, the system of pricing is pretty ridiculous. You know, the miners, you know, it's a tough business as it is. You know, we spend a lot of time trying to, you know, get the metal out of the ground and get it into commercial use, which is critical for, you know, sustaining, you know, the human race and all the, you know, things that we require as a human race. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize how important these metals are, yet, you know, we don't get a fair pricing environment for, you know, this metal that is extracted with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, I think it just really needs to be said that, again, it's clown world because you take a look at the coronavirus spreading around the globe, but look what it's doing to China. It's literally shutting down one of the world's largest economies, and the manufacturing there is being affected. Meanwhile, the U.S. stock market is just shrugging it all off. So there are some lucid people out there, though, people doing real research, coming to the conclusion that silver is the best buy out there right now. I want to share this with you. This is from January of this year. Guggenheim Partners Scott Meinard on Bloomberg. He was asked this, and listen to his answer.
We need a conviction trade. Big calls, made a lot of headlines.
Right.
Where do you put your money? What's the number one conviction trade right now for you, 2020?
Silver.
Silver.
Silver. Why not gold?
Because when you look at the relative values of silver and gold, silver today is about, let's say, 65% below its prior peak. Gold is getting very close to its prior peak.
Can it go exponential like we've seen in some of the non-precious metals?
I think there's a high probability of that.
Hey, look, it's been said that men go mad in herds and regain their senses one by one. I think Guggenheim has got it right with silver.
Yeah, I heard him make those statements a couple of weeks ago at Davos, and look, it's there's lots of people starting to get on the silver bandwagon. We're not seeing it showing up in price yet. I bought 200 ounces of physical just last week. 200 Canadian maples I bought, and whenever I can get a chance, I travel extensively, but I was around at the right time and had some cash and decided to convert it into real money, and that's what I did, and I regularly do it.
All right, let me ask you this, just in regards to the economy. Well, let's talk about the macro economy, the global economy. Are you concerned about this coronavirus? I mean, it's having a very real impact on China. How could it not eventually have an impact on Apple, on the U.S. economy, on the U.S. stock market?
Yeah, look, I'm in Vancouver here. This is a hub of Asia. We have something in the order of 55% of the population. Vancouver being Asian. It's been like this for years, and they're a great part of our community, and a lot of Asians are walking around with masks on, which is quite interesting. I was just out walking around the other day, and at least probably 20-30% of the people walking around the streets are wearing masks. I have not seen it to that degree before. I am planning on going to Hong Kong in a couple of weeks, and I have a trip, a spring break with my wife and daughter to Vietnam in 3 or 4 weeks as well. So we're contemplating canceling both of those trips. So far, we're still on to go, but obviously, there's lots of concerns around that.
All right, I want to ask you about the Fed. President Trump is constantly very excited about the Dow going up, the NASDAQ going up, but can we give credit to the U.S. economy, or is it really the Fed's debt binge? Because when I'm seeing them print and print and print, it seems to me all that money is going straight into the stock market.
Well, if you look at the repo charts, which is pretty interesting, there's some good guys out there starting to kind of put 2 and 2 together, and I've seen pretty specific graphs of when the repo is occurring and how it translates in the S&P actually going up, and the days the S&P actually drop, there's no repo, and the days that the S&P are up, that's when the repo kicks in. So and then another headline I noticed was some of this repo is going into the hedge fund community to buoy up, I gather, their risks in order for them to stay long, which is it's the craziest thing in the world if that is in fact happening. Of course, the Fed will never tell us. I met with a fellow in Toronto about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he is a repo expert, and he one of his prior employers was one of the banks who was involved in repo, and he was on that trading desk, and his theory is that this repo is actually being used to fund the short position in gold and likely silver, because when gold ran from 1250 to 1500, that's when the repo started, and these short positions are quite costly to hold on to. Of course, these big banks are still holding their big shorts on both gold and silver, and his theory is that the way they're financing to remain short and continually short even more is through the repo market.
Yeah, that's the research that we've been reading about as well, and it seems to be the case. Well, let me ask you this. In a land of endless debt, I mean, what is the U.S. national debt now? 22 trillion, and we're talking about unfunded liabilities so much higher than that. Do you support zero interest rates? What do you think about zero interest rates?
Well, it's it could bankrupt the banks. Maybe that's a good thing. We'll get all these banks bankrupt and we can start over and rewrite the system. The banks are definitely not going to be making money in a zero interest rate environment. No, it'll be the end of the U.S. dollar. It'll be end of the banking system as we know it. These negative interest rates, bonds, they're only being bought by central banks. There's really no, or through legislation. Some governments are obviously legislating their pension funds to make investments in this crazy market. But other than that, there's no traditional type of investor buying zero rate bonds. So if that market does grow into even a larger market, it's around $14 trillion last I saw. If that number starts to climb, north of, let's say, 20 trillion, then all of a sudden, I think there's a limit to how much buying that can actually occur in a zero rate environment. And there'll be just simply no buyers around. And I can't see it lasting for any great degree. And, look, it's all good for gold anyways. We know that the banks are backed themselves in the corner. The G20 are manipulating these markets like crazy. I'm sure there's regular conversations taking place about which government should be doing what to keep this whole house of cards afloat. And these are a bunch of academics who think they're doing the right thing. I don't know why a politician or someone that works in these institutions thinks that the people of their countries ever gave them permission to use taxpayer money to manipulate the stock markets or manipulate the markets. But for whatever reason, they think that they have the authority and the power and the will of the people to do it. But yet they don't want to come clean and tell people what they're doing, because then the whole, house of cards would disintegrate in front of their eyes. But, ultimately that's what we need. We need some type of reset, and whether it's going to happen a year from now or 2 years from now, it's so hard to tell. But I think gold is telling us a lot. This 1550 gold is holding up very nicely in a very strong U.S. dollar environment. And I think that's saying a lot about the future price of gold over the coming short while.
Yeah. You used the term house of cards. I use that term a lot too. And again, I'll do a screen share here real quickly. Again, I don't think there's a better example of that than Boeing. I hate to pick on Boeing, but let's just make the point. The stock is at $348 per share. It has a market cap of $195 billion, and they have had no new jetliner orders in January, and they have their MAX plane grounded all over the world. So this really is complete and total nonsense. It's a house of cards. Meanwhile, the company you founded and have been the head of since day one, First Majestic Silver, is sitting at about $9.70 a share. Tell us right now, with Boeing sitting at a $195 billion market cap and nobody's buying their planes, what's the market cap right now at First Majestic?
We're around $2.5 billion in that range.
Okay, listen to this, folks. This man pulls real money out of the ground, is punished by Wall Street, as all of us who have invested in silver in physical form, and in many cases the mining shares are, and gets no love. We're sitting here at a $2 billion market cap. Meanwhile, Boeing can't produce a plane that flies. All right, so tell us about...
Not only that, Sean, you couldn't even build a Boeing plane without silver.
Yeah, it's such a great point. You couldn't build an Apple computer or an iPhone or a solar panel or a Tesla. Tesla electric car. Yeah, and look at Tesla stock. I mean, this is quite literally clown world, and I'll say it again. Men go mad in herds and come back to their senses one by one. All right, so tell us about First Majestic. Tell us about production levels. What do you see moving forward? How are things looking?
Yeah, look, we had a great 2019. The financials are coming out shortly. We had a great Q3, great Q4. Of course, the metal price helped. Not only did we produce, more silver than we ever done in the history of the company. We've been in business now for 18 years, and we did just over 24 million silver equivalent ounces last year. And, that was an exciting year for us. We have two of our biggest mines, San Dimas and Santa Elena, just, producing like crazy at a super low cost. And both of those mines are being expanded. Currently, we're investing quite a lot of money in 2019 and 2020. And of course, even in 2021. 3-year investment program in both of those operations, which will give us a pretty substantial growth in 2021 and 2022. We're looking for M&A stuff constantly. For your listeners, First Majestic's the second largest silver producer in Mexico. We employ about 5,000 people, 3 producing mines. We did shut down a couple mines last year because they were just small legacy mines. They were just costing us too much money to operate. There was, it costs as much money to produce from a small mine than it does a large mine. So, of our size, it just makes more sense to be operating bigger mines. So that's a decision we had to make as a team. But no, the future looks really bright. And look, I think, silver goes through $20. For us at a company our size, for every move in silver price, it's basically another $25 million in revenue. And our costs are pretty fixed. So that money just drops right to the bottom line. And we saw that happen in Q3 and Q4 last year.
All right. Well, I tell you, I just think that you're talking to the woke crowd, right? And we're not talking lefty wokes. We're talking about people who actually understand the Federal Reserve, the nature of central banking, the nature of this debt-based system, and the nature of this economic clown world. Let's talk about First Mining Finance. It's near lows. What, in a world where gold is actually holding up well, what are investors afraid of here? This seems to be lunacy to me to be at 17 cents.
Yeah, look, I put this, First Mining was the third company I put together in my career from scratch. So the first company I put together was First Quantum Minerals back in '92, and that company became in the top 5 copper companies in the world. I think the market cap today is something like, I think it's north of 10 billion. I actually should look at it, but it's a big copper company. I put together First Majestic together in 2002. And I put First Mining together in 2015. And the similarity between those 3 companies was the simple fact that I was buying assets that were out of favor, that no one wanted, and I had no competition putting those portfolios together. In the early 90s, putting together a copper portfolio in Africa, it wasn't that difficult to do because there was just no one around that even had the balls to do something like that. And when I put together First Majestic's portfolio in 2002, it was a very, very similar situation where, I was, the first Canadian that had shown up in Mexico for probably a decade, with a paycheck or with a checkbook, ready to buy assets. And, I ran into no competition and built what I consider is one of the best silver portfolios there is in the entire silver industry. So First Mining, I decided in 2014 that the valuations were just so ridiculously low out there that I had to put together something, and gold made sense. And I looked at, I had my technical team look at, all the different publicly traded gold companies out there. We actually created a list of about 100 companies, and over a series of, few months as we pared down that list, setting up different criteria, a whole list of companies fell out of that mix. And we set ourselves on a very aggressive acquisition campaign starting in early 2015, ending in middle of 2016. And I'd bought 8 companies over that period of time and accumulated over 11 million ounces of gold in Ontario and Quebec, which I consider 2 of the most best mining jurisdictions on the planet for a mining company to be active in. So we've got an amazing portfolio at First Mining, and there's nothing out there that even compares to it. But one of the challenges when you do that is that a lot of public companies, a lot of mining companies, they're single asset companies, and it's easy for the market to measure them. But when you've got a portfolio of 25 assets, which First Mining has, it does create some confusion. And I've been through this before. I've built companies in the past. I know exactly what the market's thinking and how we get through it. And, it is a bit of a grind. We have to raise capital, because it is very cash intensive business. We just have to continually de-risk this incredible portfolio. And that's what we're doing. We're building roads. We've got agreements being put in place with Indigenous local communities. We're working with the government on permitting. We're drilling. We're doing a lot of boring stuff that, people kind of yawn about, but it's all critical stuff for unlocking the value of this portfolio. And that's what the current management team doing. The new president, Dan Wilton from National Bank, just joined the company about 10 months ago as a CEO, and he's doing a fantastic job. And look, it's just going to take time. I just bought another 1 million shares myself at 22 cents Canadian. I saw on your screen you just had up there, it was trading at 17 cents US, which is pre-seed capital. When I took the company public, back in April 2015, we did the seed at 25 cents, and the stock ran all the way up to $1.33, I think was the high, and it had a $600 million market cap at its peak back in mid 2016 when silver and gold had that big rally in 2016. But since then it's languished a little bit, and these prices, as far as I'm concerned, it's a great buy.
That's so interesting. Guys, I want to say something here. This is not a solicitation to buy or sell any shares, but what Keith just said is very interesting. The pre-seed money, the money in the know people were getting in on First Mining Gold at 25 cents US. It's now at 17 cents US, and it's a better company now with more infrastructure. Anyway, the ticker OTC is FFMGF. That's First Mining Gold. Let's just circle back as we round out this conversation to silver.
Sure.
Guggenheim Partners, Scott Minerd, his top pick for 2020, silver. If that proves to play out and he's right, that's a huge win for all of us who hold silver. But tell people how it might be a big win for people who hold First Majestic, because it is one of the purest silver plays in the world. Can you tell people what that means?
Yeah, when you say one of the purest, I think it actually is the purest, at least out of the big companies. There are some tiny little producers out there that may have a higher percentage, but they don't really count in the whole scheme of things. But out of the larger companies, we're about 65% of our revenue from the sale of silver. The rest is gold. We only produce two metals right now in the form of Dory bars, and it's great to be in that space. But the leverage that we have based on that purity, and it's something that's very dear to me, because when we look at acquiring assets, I'm always challenged or always try to maintain that purity. And it's very tough to do. And over the last decade, I've seen a lot of what we know as silver companies become gold companies, because it's just so easy. It's much easier to find a gold mine than a silver mine for whatever reason, and it's just a fact of life. And that's why a lot of silver companies have turned into gold companies. But when silver does move, what tends to happen is a rush of capital comes into the purer plays. And in the case of First Majestic, when you can go back and look at the 18-year chart yourself, or have your listeners go look at it, because it's better to probably witness it. But in 2016, just to give you an example, silver prices started that year at $13.50 approximately. Silver hit approximately $21 by July of that year. So big move, approximately $7 move in silver prices in a very short period of time, 6 months. Our stock was at about $4 US at the time when silver was $13.50, and it ran up to 21 US. So it basically went up, $16 or in that range, which is virtually 2.5 times move for every ounce, every dollar in silver price move. Our stock moved 2.5 times, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it very much is. All right, before I let you go, I do have a couple questions from my buddy Matt. He's my contributor over there at sgtreport.com, where we provide real news, the antidote to corporate propaganda 24 hours a day. And Matt wanted to ask you this. He's excited that I was having you on. He said, what are your projections for finding more silver? Again, as we look at the palladium market, there's only so much palladium out there. Are people finding it harder and harder and harder to find silver in physical form?
Well, yeah, for sure. A lot of this stuff comes down to price, obviously. But if you look at silver production over the last 4 years, silver production has been declining on a global scale. Countries like Mexico, Australia, Canada, even some of the European countries who are producers like Russia, China, are producing less silver today than they did 3-4 years ago. And there's geologically, we understand, at least scientists understand, that there's approximately 16-to-1 silver to gold in the Earth's crust. That's kind of the understood number. Everyone agrees with that number. Yet we're mining 8-to-1, which is pretty shocking. So for every 1 ounce of gold worldwide that the industry is mining, only 8 ounces of silver is being mined globally. So we're half what the scientists think exists in the earth, but not only that, we're trading at north of 85-to-1. So the relationships simply just don't make any sense at all. And then you look at my prior comment when I put this company together for Majestic together back 18 years ago, there was a handful, a good solid 5 or 6 companies that had over 50% of their revenues from the sale of silver. And, you know, I became part of that group. But none of those maintained their 50%. We're the only company that's actually maintained a north of 50% revenue from the sale of silver of the larger players, which tells you that there's no silver mines out there. So silver production is dropping. Silver mines are hard to find. There's no silver mines out there that I know of that's been discovered lately that's going to be coming into production anytime soon. So yeah, and we're, you know, with increasing demand, you know, through you name it, solar panels, electric cars, you know, the electronics, everything that we want as the human race to go green and to have a different electrical infrastructure to electrify the planet, all requires enormous amounts of metal, and silver is one of those key metals that's used in this whole new phenomenon that the human race is pushing. And this ball's not going backwards, it's going forward. So we're going to need more silver as we develop further, and it's just simply not around.
Keith, all right, last question, and you mentioned it. This was Matt's final question for you, and you touched on it there, the silver to gold ratio. As I look back at my notes from last week, I jotted down some numbers. At one point last week, silver was at $17.48 an ounce. Gold was at $15.67 per ounce. That's a silver to gold ratio of 89 to 1. Now, you already touched on it, so you don't have to beat this horse to death, but I got to say, only in clown world, where Boeing can still be trading at all-time highs and Tesla's trading near all-time highs and Netflix is trading near all-time highs, only in clown world could we see an 89 to 1 silver to gold ratio when it looks like the global economy could come to a screeching halt thanks to a bioweapon virus. My words, not yours. Honestly, we have to leave people with what lunacy this is, 89 to 1 silver to gold ratio.
Well, it tells me I need to buy more silver.
I mean, really, men come to their senses one by one. Silver, you're finding the stuff 8 to 1 in the ground versus gold. Meanwhile, Wall Street is saying, nope, silver's worth a fraction of a fraction, almost 1/100th of what gold is worth.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. And as I said earlier, you know, none of these companies would exist without this silver. You know, silver is in everything that we do as a human race. And you take silver out of our daily lives, our lives are going to get very complicated and not very comfortable. We need silver desperately every single day.
Yeah, I don't think people even know how much silver is, how close they are to it every single day. Apple laptops, Apple iPhones, solar panels, electric cars, it's everywhere. And it's far more needed than palladium. The palladium thing I think is telling us a very important story. Hey, look, I think that you won the CEO of the Year award from Kitco because you're one of the most approachable, affable guys out there, probably the most famous certainly silver miner, but maybe the most famous CEO of a mining company out there. So I really appreciate your time today, Keith.
Well, you know, I like to get out there and talk to investors, and you know, we've got lots of investors in both First Mining and First Majestic who I care about, and you know, I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy talking to you today. It was great, and let's do it again.
All right, thank you. I want to remind people, too, you do have the best ticker in the world for First Majestic. That's AG, which happens to be the periodic table element letters for silver. So First Majestic Silver, guys, that's AG in the U.S. And then First Mining Gold is FFMGF on the OTC. Our guest has been the CEO of the Year in the mining industry, Keith Neumeyer. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. For Real News, I'll remind you can find us directly every single day for Real News 24/7 at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great week ahead. God bless. Bye-bye.
If what we're being told, that 400 million people are quarantined and are not working, it's a thermonuclear bomb on society.